If you are going to give me your empire, Ethan, you had better be ready for what I do with it. I said those words before I understood how much they would change my life. The rain had been tapping against the tall windows of the Blackwood estate since 6 that morning, soft at first, then steady enough to make the whole house feel sealed away from the rest of Connecticut. I stood in front of the dining room mirror, smoothing the front of my cream sweater over my very plump figure, wondering why a man like Ethan Blackwood had asked me to wear something comfortable instead of something elegant. That was the first warning. The second was the black sedan waiting outside. The third was the fact that Ethan had said almost nothing during the 40-minute drive. Ethan was 38, a mafia boss whose name could make powerful men lower their voices. But beside me, he looked strangely quiet. His black suit was perfectly fitted. His tattooed arms disappeared beneath the sleeves, while the ink continued beneath his collar and down toward his ankles, a permanent map of a life I had never fully understood. I had been married to him long enough to know his silences. This one was different. "Where are we going?" I finally asked. He looked through the windshield. "To a meeting." "You have meetings every day." "Not like this one." That answer did not help. The sedan stopped outside a downtown building with polished glass doors and a discreet brass plaque. I recognized the address. It belonged to one of Ethan's most important companies. My stomach tightened. "Why am I here?" Ethan opened his door. "Because you are the reason they are here." I stared at him. "That makes absolutely no sense." He gave me the faintest smile. "It will." Inside, the elevator carried us to the top floor. The doors opened into a boardroom larger than my entire first apartment. A long walnut table stretched beneath warm lights. 7 people were already waiting. Men in tailored suits. Women with folders arranged perfectly in front of them. Every conversation stopped when Ethan entered. Then every pair of eyes moved to me. I suddenly wished I had asked more questions. Ethan walked to the far end of the room. I followed, expecting him to take his usual seat at the head of the table. He did not. Instead, he pulled out the chair directly across from it. "Sit." I frowned. "Why?" "Because that is your chair." I almost laughed. "Ethan, I do not work here." His eyes stayed on mine. "Not yet." I sat because standing there felt even stranger. Ethan remained beside me for another second, then turned toward the room. "You all know my wife." Nobody moved. "Today, she makes the decisions." My mouth went dry. I looked at him. "Excuse me." He placed a thin black folder in front of me. "The company is yours to oversee." The room seemed to shrink. I opened the folder. Financial reports, property records, charitable accounts, business projections. Numbers stretched across page after page. I understood enough to know what I was seeing. This was not a small responsibility. It was enormous. "You cannot be serious." Ethan pulled out the chair beside mine and sat down. "I have never been more serious." One of the older executives cleared his throat. "Mr. Blackwood, with respect, this is highly unusual." Ethan did not even look at him. "I know." The man glanced at me. "Does she understand the scope of this?" I closed the folder. "I am sitting right here." Silence. Ethan looked at me then, and something in his expression softened. He was not asking me to pretend I knew everything. He was asking me to decide whether I was willing to learn. "Why me?" I whispered. He leaned back. "Because you notice people." I stared at him. "That is your reason?" "You notice the waiter who looks exhausted. You remember the receptionist's daughter has a school recital. You ask why a driver has been working 12-hour days. You see things everyone else walks past." His voice remained calm. "I have spent my entire life learning how to control numbers. You understand what numbers do to people." That sentence stayed with me. Then he pushed the folder closer. "So make the choice." I looked around the table. 7 strangers waited. Ethan waited too. For the first time since I had met him, the mafia boss was not telling me what to do. He was giving me something far more frightening. Authority. I placed my hand on the folder. "Fine," I said. "But if I am responsible for this, I am not going to be your puppet." Ethan's eyes held mine. A quiet smile appeared. "That is exactly why I chose you." The first number that made me uncomfortable was not the largest one. It was $12,400. I stared at the figure on the screen while rain whispered against the windows of Ethan's downtown office. And for the first time since he had placed his empire in my hands, I understood why he had chosen me. "What is this charge?" I asked. The room went quiet. It was only my second morning in the company headquarters, yet the 7 executives from yesterday were already sitting around the same walnut table, watching me like I had walked into an exam without studying. Ethan sat at the far end. Black suit, black shirt, tattoos visible along his neck and hands. Calm as ever. He had given me a temporary office, 3 assistants, access to the company accounts, and 1 instruction. Learn before you decide. So I had learned. I had spent the previous evening reading invoices until midnight, then woke at 6 in the morning and started again. I was not an accountant. I was not a business executive. I was a plus-size woman who had spent most of her adult life being underestimated in rooms where people valued polished shoes more than honest questions. But numbers had one beautiful quality. They did not care who was asking. That charge, one of the executives said, covers administrative adjustments connected to the employee transportation program. I looked at the report again. $12,400 every month. Correct. For 1 office. Correct. I turned the screen toward him. Then why does the transportation report show that the drivers have not received a pay adjustment in 3 years? Nobody answered. Ethan's eyes lifted from the folder in front of him. I noticed it immediately. That tiny movement. Attention. I continued. And why does the company spend more on executive parking than employee transportation? The older executive shifted in his chair. Those are separate budgets. They are separate budgets in the same company. I clicked another page. This is not just accounting. It is a choice. Silence settled over the room. I had expected Ethan to interrupt me. He did not. That was becoming his strange new habit. Letting me finish. Clara, another executive said carefully, business decisions cannot be based entirely on emotion. I looked at him. I agree. I closed the report. That is why I am looking at the numbers. Ethan's mouth moved slightly, almost a smile. I caught it. What? I asked him. Nothing. You are smiling. I am observing. You are enjoying this. Very much. I stared at him. You are impossible. And yet you married me. A few people suddenly became very interested in their papers. Heat rose into my cheeks. I ignored him. Here is what I want, I said. I want the transportation budget reviewed. I want the driver's schedules reviewed. I want every recurring administrative fee over $5,000 examined. And I want a report showing exactly who benefits from each one. The older executive leaned back. That could take weeks. Then start today. His eyebrows rose. Mrs. Blackwood, with respect, you cannot simply walk into a company and rewrite years of policy. I felt something inside me settle. Yesterday, I might have apologized. Today, I remembered Ethan's words. You notice people. I looked at the man across from me. You are right. I cannot rewrite years of policy in one morning. I paused. But I can refuse to approve another year of it. Ethan finally spoke. Do it. Everyone looked toward him. The older executive seemed stunned. Sir. Ethan's voice remained level. You heard my wife. My wife. The words should have sounded possessive. Instead, somehow, they sounded like recognition. The meeting continued for another hour. We reviewed contracts, employee benefits, vendor agreements, and expenses I barely understood. I asked questions. Lots of them. Some were simple. Some were probably irritating. Ethan answered none unless I specifically asked him. When the meeting ended, the executives filed out one by one. I remained seated, exhausted. You could have helped me, I said. Ethan stood and adjusted his cuff. You did not need help. I had no idea what half those documents meant. You asked. That is not the same thing. He walked toward the window. The city stretched beneath us, gray and silver beneath the rain. You wanted authority, he said. Authority means making decisions before you feel ready. I looked at him. And if I make the wrong one? He turned. His eyes met mine. Then we learned from it. That answer surprised me. The Mafia boss everyone described as impossible to challenge had just admitted that I could make mistakes. I almost smiled. Then my assistant appeared at the open doorway holding a sealed folder. Mrs. Blackwood, this was delivered for you. I accepted it. No return address. No company logo. Just my name. Clara Blackwood. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one sentence typed across the center. Ask your husband why he has been hiding the real owner of this company from you. I looked up. Ethan was still by the window. And suddenly, he was no longer smiling. Then tell me who owns it. I kept my voice calm, even though my fingers were tightening around the paper. Ethan did not answer immediately. The rain had stopped, but the windows of his office still carried thin silver trails, and the city below looked washed clean. He stood beside the glass with his back to me, his tattooed hands resting loosely at his sides. Clara, he finally said, there are things about this company you do not need to know. I almost laughed. You gave me control of it yesterday. I gave you authority to manage it. That sounds like a very careful distinction. He turned. His expression was unreadable. It is. I placed the anonymous note on the desk between us. Then explained this. His eyes dropped to the sentence. Nothing about his face changed, but I saw his shoulders become still. That was enough. You know who sent it. I have an idea. Who? Ethan walked toward the desk. Someone who wants you to doubt me. That does not answer the question. It is the answer I can give you right now. I stared at him. Yesterday, his silence had felt like confidence. Today, it felt like a locked door. I picked up the note. You told me I could make decisions. You can. Then I am making one. His eyes narrowed slightly. What decision? I am going to find out who owns this company. Ethan said nothing. My heart was beating faster now, but I refused to look away. You are not going to stop me. I could. I know. And you still think you should continue? Yes. Something changed in his expression. Not anger. Something closer to respect. He pulled out the chair across from mine and Saturday, then asked the right question. I frowned. What does that mean? Do not ask who owns the company. He tapped the paper once. Ask why the ownership was hidden. That stopped me. I sat down slowly. You are saying the note is true? I am saying the note is incomplete. Ethan opened a drawer and removed a thin file. He placed it on the desk, but did not push it toward me. 21 years ago, this company was not mine. I stared at him. Whose was it? My mother's. I had heard stories about Elizabeth Blackwood. Everyone in Ethan's family spoke about her carefully, like her name belonged to another era. She had been intelligent, charitable, and apparently determined to build something that did not depend entirely on the family name. What happened? I asked. Ethan looked toward the window. She transferred controlling ownership before she died. To you? No, my stomach tightened. Then who? He finally pushed the file toward me. I opened it. The first page showed a corporate record from 1998. The second showed a transfer agreement. The third contained a name I had never seen before. Rose Bennett. My breath caught. Bennett. Ethan nodded. Your family name. I looked up. My family. Your mother was Elizabeth's closest friend. I read the document again. The letters seemed to blur. My mother never told me any of this. She was protecting you. From what? Ethan's silence returned. I closed the file. No. You do not get to do that again. His eyes met mine. Do what? Decide what I can handle. The room became very quiet. I pushed the file toward him. If my mother was involved, then I deserved the truth. Ethan studied me for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to a locked cabinet, and entered a code. He removed a small wooden box. My pulse jumped. What is that? The last thing my mother left behind. He placed it on the desk. There was no dramatic lock, no hidden mechanism, just a worn blue ribbon tied around the box. I touched it. Why have you kept this all these years? Ethan's voice became softer. Because she told me never to open it unless you came into my life. I looked at him. She knew about me? Not you specifically. He paused. She knew your family would return someday. I untied the ribbon. Inside was an old photograph. Two young women stood outside a blue door. One was Elizabeth. The other was my mother. Between them was a little girl holding a red balloon. I stared at the child. My throat tightened. That is me. Ethan nodded. Then I noticed something written across the back of the photograph. My mother's handwriting. For words. The truth begins here. I looked at Ethan. What truth? He did not answer. Instead, he reached into the box and pulled out a second photograph. This one showed the same blue door. But standing beside my mother was a woman I recognized from the family portrait in Ethan's house. His grandmother. And beneath the photograph was a date. June 14th, 1998. The same day the ownership changed hands. I looked at Ethan. What happened that day? His eyes stayed on mine. That is what I have been trying to find out. The house remembered more than I did. That was the thought I could not escape as Ethan and I stood in the small upstairs bedroom, surrounded by faded wallpaper, old photographs, and the quiet smell of cinnamon that seemed to belong to another life. I kept staring at the photograph of my mother holding me as a baby. The blue ribbon beside it looked exactly like the one from Ethan's mother's box. I remember this room, I whispered. Ethan stood beside the doorway, watching me carefully. What do you remember? I closed my eyes. Warm light. A woman's voice humming. Someone laughing softly. Then a silver chain against my cheek. Not enough, I said. But something. Ethan stepped closer. His tattoos disappeared beneath the sleeves of his black shirt, but the ink at his neck caught the weak hallway light. He looked around the room. This was my mother's private guest room. Then why was I here? I do not know. Again. He looked at me. You are enjoying saying that. Not even a little. I opened the wooden box again. Beneath the photograph was a folded document. My mother's name appeared at the top. My breath stopped. Ethan. He took one step closer. I unfolded the paper carefully. It was a transfer agreement dated June 14, 1998. The same date we had found in the company records. My mother's signature appeared near the bottom. So did Elizabeth Blackwood's. But the most important line was above them. Beneficial ownership transferred to Clara Bennett upon reaching legal age. I read it twice. Then a third time. That says my name. Ethan went completely still. Yes. Why would I own part of your company? I do not know. Stop saying that. My voice cracked. My mother knew. Your mother knew. Your father knew. Everyone knew except me. Ethan did not defend himself. That made it worse. I turned toward him. How long have you been searching? Years. For this. For the reason my mother transferred the company. I stared at him. You knew my family was involved. I knew there was a connection. And you married me anyway? The question came out before I could stop it. His expression changed. Clara, I married you because I loved you. The room went silent. I had heard Ethan say hundreds of important things. Orders. Decisions. Promises. But never that. Not so plainly. My heart stumbled. You never said that. You never asked. That is not how marriage works. A faint sadness crossed his face. I am learning. I looked down at the document again. The words seemed heavier now. My name had been placed into an agreement before I could even speak. Maybe this explains why you gave me control of the company. Ethan shook his head. No, then why? He walked toward the window. Outside, the Connecticut evening was turning blue. Because you were always entitled to know what belonged to you. I followed him with my eyes. And the company? It was supposed to become yours when you were old enough. But it became yours instead. My father changed the structure after my mother died. I felt cold. Why? Ethan looked at me. That is the question I have been trying to answer. I picked up the document. Then we have the same question. He nodded. For once, there was no argument between us. Only two people standing inside a forgotten room, staring at a past that had quietly shaped everything. Then I noticed a small handwritten note tucked beneath the agreement. My mother's handwriting. 5 words. Do not trust Richard with Clara. I looked up slowly. Ethan saw my face. What did you find? I handed him the note. His eyes moved across the words. Then all the color seemed to leave his expression. Clara, he whispered. My father was not supposed to know you survived. Your father was not supposed to know I survived? I repeated the words, but somehow they sounded even more frightening the second time. Ethan stood across from me in the faded bedroom, holding my mother's note between his tattooed fingers. The evening light had almost disappeared from the windows. Only a thin blue glow remained. What does survived mean? I asked. Ethan did not answer. Ethan. His jaw tightened. I was 16 when my mother died. I knew there were secrets. I did not know you were part of them. But you knew my family. I knew your mother's name. That is not enough. I stepped toward him, clutching the document against my chest. You gave me control of your company. You told me I was entitled to it. You showed me a photograph of my mother. Now I find a note saying your father was never supposed to know I survived. How much did you actually know before you married me? Ethan looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I never expected. Not enough. I froze. He walked to the old wooden desk and opened a drawer. 6 months ago, I found a file in my father's private records. I found your name. And you never told me? I did not know whether the information was real. So you investigated me. I investigated the records. That is a very convenient distinction. His eyes met mine. You are right. That answer stopped me. Ethan usually defended every decision he made. This time, he simply accepted my anger. He placed the file on the desk. I opened it. The first page was a copy of a birth record. My name appeared near the top. Clara Bennett. My mother's name beneath it. Then the third line made my fingers stop. Father, unknown. I stared at it. I had seen that line before. Years ago, I had been told it was simply an empty space in my history. Now it felt like a door someone had locked from the other side. You found this 6 months ago, I whispered. Yes. And you said nothing. I wanted to know why. You could have asked me. Would you have believed me? I looked up. I might have. I did not want to bring you into something I could not explain. I closed the file. You already brought me into it. I am apparently the owner of a company my mother helped create. Ethan nodded. Yes. And now I find out your father may have believed I was dead. Yes. Then I am done being protected from the truth. His expression softened. I know. I turned another page. Behind the birth record was an old handwritten note. The ink had faded, but the sentence remained clear. Clara was never supposed to grow up believing she was alone. My breath caught. Who wrote this? Ethan looked at the handwriting. My Aunt Eleanor. Your aunt knew me? She knew your mother. That is not what I asked. Ethan became quiet. I waited. Finally, he said, Eleanor met you when you were a child. I stared at him. Where? At the blue house. My skin prickled. The house in the photograph. Yes. I remembered fragments again. Cinnamon. Warm sunlight. My mother laughing. A woman kneeling in front of me and fixing the collar of my little dress. I had always assumed it was a dream. Eleanor was there. I whispered. Ethan nodded. She was there the day your mother signed the ownership agreement. I looked down at the document. Why would my mother transfer everything to me? Because she believed the company would eventually become dangerous in the wrong hands. Your father's hands. Ethan did not answer. He did not need to. I folded the note carefully. Then why did he change the agreement? Ethan's voice dropped. Because he believed you were gone. Gone where? He looked toward the window. That is the part one cannot explain. Then let us find someone who can. Ethan turned toward me. There is one person left. Who? Eleanor. My heart jumped. Your aunt is alive? Yes. Where is she? Ethan hesitated. That hesitation told me more than any document could. Ethan. He finally looked at me. She has been living in Vermont under another name for 20 years. The room seemed to tilt. Why? Because my father spent years trying to find her. I held my breath. And does she know about me? Ethan reached into the box and pulled out a small sealed envelope. My name was written across it in faded blue ink. She does now. I stared at the envelope. When did she send this? Ethan looked at the postmark. Yesterday. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. Then I saw the final line written beneath my name. Clara, if Ethan brought you this letter, your father is still alive. The envelope stayed open on the desk, but I could not make myself read the words again. My father was alive. That sentence had turned the entire room unfamiliar. Ethan stood across from me, silent, his dark tattoos disappearing beneath the sleeves of his black shirt as he watched me struggle to understand a truth I had spent 29 years believing was impossible. Where is he? I asked. Ethan looked at the letter. I do not know. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You said your aunt sent this yesterday. She did. Then she knows where he is. She may know where he was. I stared at him. That is not good enough. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I picked up the letter again. The final line seemed to burn into my thoughts. Your father is still alive. Beneath it was an address in Vermont. Not a name, not a phone number, just a street, a town, and a small handwritten note. Come alone if you want the truth. I showed it to Ethan. His expression changed immediately. No, I lowered the paper. Excuse me. You are not going alone. The letter says alone. I do not care. There it was. The old Ethan. The man who could turn a suggestion into a command without raising his voice. I placed the letter on the table. Then you did not learn anything from giving me control of your company. His eyes narrowed. This is different. Why? Because this is about your father. Exactly. I stood. It is my family. Ethan moved toward me, then stopped. I could see the argument forming behind his eyes. For a moment, I thought he would tell me what to do. Instead, he took a breath. You are right. I blinked. What? You are right. He stepped back. I will not decide for you. That surprised me more than the letter had. I picked up my coat. Then I am going. I know. You are not coming. His silence answered me. Ethan, I will stay nearby. That is not what alone means. Clara. His voice softened. I am trying. That stopped me. The mafia boss who could command an entire room was standing in front of me admitting that he was trying to learn how to let me choose. I looked away before he could see how much that mattered. 2 hours later, we were driving north through Connecticut. I had won the argument only technically. Ethan was not in the car with me. He was following several minutes behind in another vehicle. I decided not to complain. The road stretched beneath a pale afternoon sky, and the scenery slowly changed from crowded highways to quiet towns, old barns, and rows of trees beginning to turn gold. I kept thinking about my father. Had he wondered about me? Had he kept photographs? Had he ever tried to find me? And if he was alive, why had he stayed away? The address led us to a small town near the Vermont border. I parked outside a modest bookstore with green window frames. Nothing about it looked connected to Ethan Blackwood's world. That somehow made it more frightening. I stepped inside. A bell chimed above the door. The smell of paper and coffee filled the room. An elderly woman stood behind the counter. She looked at me once, then went completely still. "Are you Eleanor?" I asked. Her eyes dropped to the envelope in my hand. "You came." My heart began pounding. "You know me?" Eleanor slowly stepped around the counter. "I knew your mother." "That is not what I asked." Her eyes filled with something I could not name. "You have his face." I froze. "My father's." She nodded. Then she looked past me through the glass door. Her expression changed. "Where is the man who brought you here?" I turned toward the street. Ethan's car was parked half a block away. Eleanor lowered her voice. "Tell him to stay outside." "Why?" She reached beneath the counter and removed a small photograph. She handed it to me. It showed a younger man standing beside my mother. I knew immediately. My hands began to tremble. "That is my father." Eleanor nodded. "His name is Daniel." I looked at her. "Where is he?" She glanced toward the back of the bookstore. Then she whispered, "He is upstairs." My breath stopped. Before I could move, a man's voice came from above us. Older, quiet, familiar in a way that made no sense. "Clara." I looked toward the staircase. Eleanor closed her eyes. "He has been waiting 29 years to say your name. The man you thought was gone has been waiting for you." Eleanor's words followed me up the narrow staircase, each step sounding louder than it should have. My hand rested on the wooden rail. My heart was somewhere in my throat. At the top, I saw him. An older man stood beside the window, one hand resting against the sill, his shoulders slightly bent by years that had passed without me. Gray touched his dark hair. His face was thinner than the photograph, but his eyes were the same eyes I had seen in my own mirror for 29 years. I stopped breathing. "Dad." The word barely left my mouth. He turned. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then his eyes filled with tears. "Clara." My knees almost weakened. I gripped the railing and stared at the stranger who somehow knew exactly how to say my name. I wanted to run toward him. I wanted to leave. I wanted to ask why he had missed birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings, every ordinary moment that other daughters took for granted. Instead, I whispered, "You are alive." Daniel nodded slowly. "I am." "You knew about me?" His expression broke. "Every year." That answer hurt more than silence could have. "Every year." I stepped closer. "You knew where I was?" "Not always." "Did you try to find me?" Eleanor looked away. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. "I tried." "Then why did you never come?" His hand tightened around the edge of the window frame. "Because your mother asked me not to." I stared at him. "My mother? She believed you were safer without me." "Safer?" My voice shook. "I grew up believing my father had abandoned us." "I know. I thought maybe I was not worth coming back for." Daniel looked at me then, and the pain in his face made my anger hesitate. "Never say that again." I swallowed. "Then tell me why." He gestured toward an old chair. I sat. Eleanor remained near the doorway. Daniel took the chair opposite me. "Your mother and I discovered something about Richard Blackwood." Ethan's father's name changed the air in the room. "What?" "Your mother worked with Elizabeth Blackwood before either of them understood what Richard was becoming. He wanted complete control of the company. Not just the legal ownership. Everything. Accounts. Property. Decisions. People." Daniel paused. "Your mother discovered that Richard had altered financial records and hidden agreements." I looked at Eleanor. She nodded. "She tried to expose him?" "She tried to protect you," Daniel said. The ownership transfer was her answer. My fingers curled around the edge of my coat. "So she gave me the shares?" "Yes." "And Richard thought I was dead." Daniel's eyes dropped. "Your mother made him believe you had disappeared permanently." I stared at him. Suddenly the old photograph in Ethan's house made sense. The blue house. The secret room. The agreement. All of it had been arranged around one impossible goal, keeping me beyond Richard's reach. "Why did you disappear too?" I asked. Daniel's face became very still. Because Richard found out I knew. Silence. Then I heard footsteps downstairs. Ethan. I turned toward the door. Daniel immediately stood. He cannot come up here. He is my husband. I know who he is. Then you know he is not his father. Daniel's eyes narrowed. That is what I need to know. I stepped between the staircase and the room. Ethan did not know any of this. Daniel studied me. You trust him? The question was simple. My answer was not. I thought about the black cars. The company. The secrets. The way Ethan had finally stopped trying to make decisions for me. I remembered him saying, I am trying. Yes. I said. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Then ask him one question. Which one? Ask him what his father told him about your mother. My stomach tightened. You think Ethan knows something? I think Richard told his son a version of the truth. Eleanor quietly stepped forward. And there is one more thing. She reached inside an old cabinet and removed a small cassette tape. My mother's handwriting covered the label. Clara, play this only when you find your father. My breath caught. Daniel looked at the tape, then at me. Your mother recorded that before she disappeared. I could barely speak. She disappeared? Daniel nodded. She did not die when you were told she did. The room seemed to lose all sound. Downstairs, Ethan called my name. I looked toward the staircase. Then the cassette clicked softly in Eleanor's hand. My mother was not dead. She had been hiding. And somehow, she had left me a message for the day I finally found the truth. The cassette player clicked, and then I heard my mother breathe. Just one breath. Soft. Close. 29 years vanished in an instant. I sat frozen in Eleanor's bookstore, staring at the little machine, while Daniel stood beside the window and Ethan waited downstairs. Then my mother's voice filled the room. Clara, if you are hearing this, you found your father. My eyes burned. I pressed my hand against my mouth. It was her. Not a recording I had imagined. Not an old memory distorted by time. Her voice. Warm. Familiar. Alive in a way that made my entire chest ache. I need you to understand something before you learn the rest. Your father did not leave you. He stayed away because I asked him to. I looked at Daniel. He lowered his head. I was afraid Richard would use you to control us, my mother continued. He had already begun changing the company records. He had already made people believe things that were not true. I could not prove everything, so I made one decision I knew would protect you. I made you disappear. My tears fell silently. I told everyone you had died because a living daughter could be used against me. A dead daughter could not. Daniel closed his eyes. Eleanor reached for my shoulder, but I barely noticed. Then my mother's voice softened. There is something else you need to know about Ethan. My breath caught. Ethan. Even hearing his name from her mouth felt impossible. His mother, Elizabeth, was my closest friend. She knew what Richard was doing. She helped me transfer the ownership into your name. But she made a mistake. She trusted someone she should not have trusted. The cassette crackled. I leaned closer. Richard did not create the problem alone. Someone inside our company helped him. Someone who had access to every document, every account, every private agreement. Daniel suddenly looked toward the door. Turn it off. I stared at him. Why? Because you need to hear the rest somewhere safe. I have spent my entire life hearing half-truths. I pressed the button again. My mother's voice returned. Clara, if Ethan is with you when you hear this, do not blame him for his father's choices. Ethan was a child when I made this recording. He knew nothing. Relief moved through me so quickly that I almost cried harder. Then came the sentence that changed everything. But if Ethan is with you, ask him about the silver key. I looked at Daniel. What silver key? He shook his head. I do not know. My mother continued. Richard kept one final ledger outside the company records. Elizabeth knew where it was. I knew where it was. Your father knew where it was. But after Elizabeth died, the key disappeared. I stared at the small cassette player. Where is it now? My mother's voice became almost a whisper. Ethan has it. The recording ended. Silence. Real silence. I turned slowly toward the staircase. Ethan stood there. His black shirt was open at the collar, revealing the tattooed skin across his neck and shoulders, and his expression had gone completely still. You heard that, I whispered. He nodded. Yes. Do you have a silver key? He did not answer. That was answer enough. I stood. Ethan. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small metal key attached to a worn leather cord. I stared at it. Where did you get that? My mother gave it to me when I was 17. Daniel stepped forward. What did she tell you? Ethan looked at him. She told me never to let Richard see it. My heart pounded. Then why did you never tell me? Ethan looked directly at me. Because I did not know what had opened. Eleanor moved toward an old cabinet. I might. She pulled out a dusty ledger and placed it on the counter. A tiny silver symbol was stamped on the cover. Ethan held up the key. Same symbol. My mother's final secret had not been a message. It had been a direction. Ethan placed the key beside the ledger. Where is the lock? I asked. Eleanor looked toward the floor beneath the bookstore. Under this building. Daniel went pale. No, I turned toward him. What? He stared at the floor as though he had just recognized something he had spent decades trying to forget. That is not a basement. He swallowed. That is where your mother hid the original records. Then Ethan's phone rang. He looked at the screen. His expression changed. It is my father's old number. I felt the room go cold. Ethan answered. Nobody spoke for 3 seconds. Then a man's voice came through the speaker. Ethan, if Clara is with you, bring her home. It is time she learns why her mother disappeared. The voice on the phone belonged to Richard Blackwood, but for the first time, Ethan did not sound like his son. He sounded like a man hearing the past knock on a door he had spent years keeping closed. Do not answer him, Daniel said quietly. Ethan looked at him. He already knows we are here. I stood between them, still staring at the silver key on the counter. Then let him know I am done hiding. Ethan turned toward me. Clara, you do not know what is waiting. Neither did my mother when she made me disappear. My voice shook, but I did not step back. Neither did my father when he stayed away. Neither did you when you kept secrets from me. Everybody has been deciding what I can handle. I am finished with that. Ethan stared at me for several seconds. Then he nodded. All right. 2 words. No command. No argument. Somehow, they felt like the beginning of something new. Eleanor unlocked the back room beneath the bookstore. A narrow staircase led downward into a cool, unfinished space that smelled of old wood and paper. Daniel followed us slowly. Ethan stayed beside me. The silver key rested in my palm. I could feel its weight with every step. At the bottom, Eleanor stopped beside a plain wooden wall. Your mother built this section before you were born, she said. She told me it would only be opened if the 3 of you ever found each other. 3? I asked. Eleanor looked at Daniel, then Ethan. You, your father, and the person your mother trusted to finish what she started. My eyes moved toward Ethan. Elizabeth. Eleanor nodded. Your husband's mother. Ethan lowered his gaze. She knew. She knew everything she could prove, Eleanor said. And she left instructions. She pointed toward a small metal plate hidden beneath a layer of dust. A silver symbol matched the one on the ledger. Ethan handed me the key. You should open it. I looked at him. Why me? Because this was meant for you. I placed the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The wall opened inward. Behind it sat a narrow cabinet filled with folders, photographs, old contracts, and handwritten journals. No fortune. No hidden empire. Just years of truth waiting in silence. I pulled out the first folder. My mother's name was written across it. Underneath were 3 words. For Clara only. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first page contained a letter. Clara, if you are reading this, then the people I trusted finally found one another. I stopped. Ethan read over my shoulder. Daniel stood behind us, breathing slowly. The letter explained everything. My mother had discovered that Richard had secretly redirected company assets through private agreements. Elizabeth had helped her document the evidence. Daniel had wanted to take the information to authorities, but my mother believed Richard would retaliate through influence and reputation rather than truth. So she chose disappearance. She created a false record of my death, sent Daniel away, and placed my inheritance under a structure Richard could not easily access. But there was one thing she had never been able to recover. The original ledger. I looked at the cabinet. This is it. Ethan nodded. The final pages were written by Elizabeth. She had documented every questionable transfer, every hidden agreement, and every name connected to the scheme. Richard's name appeared repeatedly, but the final entry stopped me. Elizabeth had written that Richard was not the only person involved. Someone else inside the family had helped him. Someone Ethan had trusted for years. Who? I whispered. Ethan leaned closer. His face changed as he read the name. No, I looked at him. Who is it? He did not answer. Daniel reached for the page. His expression became pale. It cannot be. Tell me. Ethan finally looked at me. My Uncle Thomas. The room fell silent. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. A woman's voice whispered, Clara, listen carefully. Your mother is alive, but Richard has found her. My heart stopped. Who are you? The woman breathed softly. Someone who owes your mother a debt. Where is she? A pause. Then the answer came. At the Blackwood estate. Ethan stepped closer. I looked at him. That is impossible. She would never go there. The woman replied. She did not go there willingly. She went there because she knew you would eventually come looking. The call ended. I lowered the phone. Ethan looked at me, and for once, neither of us needed to explain what came next. I picked up my mother's letter and held it against my chest. 29 years ago, she had disappeared to protect me. Tonight, I finally understood the promise hidden inside that sacrifice. She had never abandoned me. She had been waiting for the day I became strong enough to find her. And now, for the first time in my life, I was not running from my family's past. I was walking toward it. Ethan reached for my hand, then stopped, leaving the choice to me. I took his hand. Daniel watched silently. Eleanor opened the bookstore door above us. Cold Vermont air drifted down the stairs. I looked at the silver key one last time. It had opened more than a hidden room. It had opened the truth. And somewhere beyond those quiet roads, my mother was waiting.